everyone. Good afternoon.
Hey
Thank you
Vicky,
for joining us
Abhishek.
Hello.
today. I will give the audience members another minute or so to join the session today, just in case they're running a bit behind. But we're all set and ready to go for our session today. A bit different than previous. There's three of us this time compared to the usual two panelists, but I'm happy to share the stage with my fellow colleagues here today. Previously, some of you may have noticed that the sessions were titled Dayforce Hello Help Desk from Silver Cloud. We've amended our title slightly. We are now titling these sessions Dayforce Max. So essentially, we're supporting our audience members and listeners with maximizing your Dayforce system. So if you do recognize Hello Help Desk, that's our previous name. We're now going with Dayforce Max sessions. So today's topic is all about mastering the scheduling functionality of the system. This is to enable your workforce, whether it's managers or employees, a way to leverage your standard Dayforce features, which will help make everyone's lives easier. We know that the scheduling process is typically a frustrating pain point for many organizations. So whether you're a system administrator, a workforce management SME, or even a line that's responsible for publishing multiple, we hope our audience today will take away some solutions to help or helpful tips to alleviate the scheduling pain points that we often encounter. If you do have any questions for our audience members, please pop them in the Zoom chat. If we do have some time toward the end of the session, we'll certainly address them. If we're not able to, since we have a very packed agenda today, we will follow up with the participants directly with a response to your query. As mentioned, joined with me today are my colleagues, Hemraj and Abhishek. I'll hand it over to Hemraj to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Hemraj and I have been working with Dayforce for over a little bit more than 8 years now. I started with Ceridian, known as Dayforce, and I've been with Silver Cloud for a bit more than 3 years now. I'm currently a Dayforce WFM manager and I look after a small WFM team within Silver Cloud. Thanks.
Over to you, Abhishek.
Maybe.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Abhishek. So I'm principal consultant here at Silver Cloud. I've been with Ceridian, now known as Dayforce, for a bit more than 7 years, and currently with Silver Cloud for a bit more than 3 years.
Thanks, Abhishek. For those
you.
that haven't met me previously, I'm Vicky. I'm the optimization lead for the Dayforce practice here at Silver Cloud. My first taste of Dayforce implementation was on the client side for talent modules, and I currently work with a number of different Dayforce clients that have already gone live and need a bit of support in terms of maximizing their solution. So very nice to have you both with me here today. Let's start with a brief overview of scheduling features in the Dayforce system, just for those that are a bit newer or are thinking about embarking on their Dayforce implementation journey. Sometimes we use terminology such as WFM, workforce management, scheduling, and timesheets in our world very often. But those that are a bit new, Hemraj, could you kindly just clarify the differences between some of the terminology and the features that I mentioned?
Yeah, sure, Vicky. If we think about it, what we're looking at is the schedule module in Dayforce today. Is a central part of workforce management, WFM, and is really here to help organization plan, create, manage, and optimize employee work schedule. It also includes several interconnected components that provide both employees and managers with visibility, control, and automation around scheduling. The main difference between the schedule and the timesheet, you can look at the timesheet, is to do more with tracking of employee time data. Usually you will have employee that punch against schedule that would have been created already via the schedule module. So these are the main factors that differentiate between the two modules within the WFM side of things.
Thanks, Hemraj. And Abhishek, what are some common industries that would heavily rely on these scheduling features configured? In your experience, what have you encountered in the past?
Yeah, so the main industries we've encountered that would typically use or heavily use scheduling in Dayforce are those with high employee turnover, hourly workforces, variable shift needs, and specific compliance requirements. So those industries would include like the retail sector, healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, public sector or government, and transport and logistics.
Great. And for those listeners who may feel that scheduling is maybe not a priority for themselves when it comes to time and attendance, or perhaps you're in a different sector or your workforce traditionally is more of the Monday to Friday salary type of workers, we will be covering a scenario later in the session, which covers the importance of setting up scheduling and shift rotations, even if your organization doesn't publish rotating, fluctuating schedules. And to give you a hint, Hemraj will be covering for the UK statutory sick pay configuration, the importance of at least having some sort of schedules configured in the background. So now that our listeners have a better understanding of the scheduling components, let's set the scene. Hemraj, what types of scenario are we keeping in mind today when we're running through some of our examples and demos in our masterclass?
I think Abby touched base already on the different industries, but what we're looking at is where schedules become important and how we make the best use of schedule within Dayforce. So we'll be looking at mostly one of the demos around sick would be looking at employees that works in the healthcare sector where they rely heavily on schedule. But we're looking basically at a workforce that is ad hoc and doesn't do your normal, typical Monday to Friday standard shift.
Great. And our first section of our masterclass today will involve some demos from the perspective of a manager. We will be running through a standard feature called filling using shift templates. So Abhishek will be demoing that on the screen. We will be sharing a demo environment with our audience members today. We'll talk a little bit more about some tips and shortcuts from a manager's perspective when they're creating a schedule, some visuals that will help them figure out what their perfect schedule will look like before they publish. We'll also run through a bit of the zone setup and why that's important for your managers when creating schedules. Thereafter, we'll log in as an employee and show you different features that can be enabled for our employees to then streamline the way they use Dayforce when it comes to managing upcoming shifts and shift swaps. That's something we'll cover toward the second part of our session today. And then toward the end, as we mentioned, Hemraj will be covering the UK statutory sick pay and how schedules are critical for those rules to function correctly. So we'll pass this over to Abhishek to then share his screen to start off with the demo of how to configure filling your schedules based on templates.
All right. Thanks, Vicky. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Okay.
Yes, we see that on the screen here.
Yep.
All right. So I'm currently logged in as the admin. Okay, so basically we'll be going through the fill and fill feature within scheduling. But prior to going through that, we'll need to do there is some prerequisite that needs to be in Dayforce first. So I'll be going through those. So let's start with our what we call shift definition. So shift definition is basically all your variation of shift that may be present within your organization. So it's basically the start and end time of your different shift and may include the different meals. Just as an example, you have if 10 to 2 p.m. and then at 10 to 6:30 p.m. with a meal in there. So that's all your variation that you may have. The second one is around shift rotation. Okay, so shift rotation, that's basically rotating the shift definition that we created, and shift rotation would be assigned to employees. Just as an example here, we have a shift rotation of 7 days. So what we are saying basically is we have created your shift definition first from 8 to 5 p.m. Then under the rotation of 7 days, you would have a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. and then a Saturday, Sunday as off. So once it's assigned to an employee, you can generate it on the timesheet on a weekly, or you can generate it ahead for a number of weeks. So that's the first one. Second is around creating the templates. Okay, so the templates relies on the shift definition that we've created. So what we are looking at here, so it's basically demand for your staff. So when we use template, we would normally assign the job. So we have what we call the location. So location are basically your physical location within your organization. And you may have specific templates for each location. So within the template, what we are doing is we are defining the jobs, okay? And then the number of shifts or the number of employee that would be required to work the job for those number of days. As an example here, we have a customer service associate and lead customer service associate with a shift definition of days. Okay, so what we are saying is for customer service, we may require 5 for a Sunday, 20 for each day until Friday, and another 5 employees for Saturday. Lead customer might be a lower demand, then we would have a Sunday, one for Sunday, 3 for the remaining days, with a 1 day, with a 1 shift on a Saturday. This is basically a demand, or it is based on historical data. Not historical, but this is a static way of creating demands for those days. Okay, so just on this, for this screen, I'm logged in as an admin, but if you prefer, so you would maybe give access to managers as well to build the templates if they are closer to scheduling and know the demands for this particular location. So once we have a jobs, shift definition, and the demands are created, save it, and then we have what we call a staff assignment policy. We just,
I think you just missed it. Yes,
Yeah.
right under shift trading.
Got it. Thanks. Okay. So the staff assignment policy, what basically it will do, just taking like scale and seniority policy here. So it will use, so once we load the template, we would need to tell the system to use these policies to assign the shift to the employee. So now there is an ordering that Dayforce can assign the shift to the employee, and that's done through that staff assignment policy. Just as an example here, what we are saying is you would be scheduling employee with a higher skill first, then check for seniority with the most senior employee first to be scheduled for the specific weeks. Once your template or your policy have been created, the next step would be to go to the actual scheduling feature. So now this is done as an admin. I will be moving to a manager role. Okay, so I'm logged in as a manager, and I'll be just be going to my scheduling. I'll just use, okay. So as a manager, so I'm logged in the schedule for my location. Okay, so just to note, I'm in location 30, and my template I've created, I have one template for my location 30 here. So as a manager, what they would be able to do is under the generate feature, we would be generating the template. So once we click on that, it will show me all available templates. So one thing to note here, you may have multiple templates for the same location based on different jobs or different policy. So you can specify which template you want to load. So I'll be loading this one. So I have a 227 shift. So just click on apply. Dayforce will load it into what we call that unfilled space at the top. So that's basically just adding it on the schedule, not assigning it yet to the employee, just a space where all the schedules are loaded first. So once all the shifts are under that unfill section, the next step would be the fill and fill. So fill and fill has been now enabled. So when I check that fill and fill, it will ask me for the ordering policy. So the ordering policy, that's actually my staff assignment policy that I have created previously. And just a few things to note here, we can specify, so even I have an ordering policy, I can also just filter it to which employee I want to fill it based on maybe pay types, pay classes, then the actual employees and the job. And then there's another section for number of days or zones that we have in the system. So the zone part, that will be covered later with MRATch, but that's another filtering that we have within scheduling. So the next step, just choose one of the ordering policy, click on OK. Dayforce will just run through it. And then it will mark it as, so you would get a summary that 62 out of 127 shifts were filled. So manager can review it. So why not all shifts were actually filled? Maybe because there is not enough employees within this location. And also Dayforce uses compliance, so a schedule compliance that would check if employee is eligible for this job as well. So once service is filled, all the system, so you would be able to see all the shift attached to my employee. So I have my lead customer service and my customer service associate, which have been scheduled. And one thing you can note, these employee or customer service associate, but were not scheduled for maybe 3 days. That's because there is schedule compliance running in the background. But there's a minimum of 20 weeks they need to meet, but it's scheduled for 16. But you would see that my shift actually 8 hours. So if I were to add another 8 hours, that would bring it to 24 hours, which would be above their 24 hours of compliance. So that's why the system would still look at your compliance and try to schedule the best fit here.
Great.
Yep. That's for that fill and fill feature.
Yes, thanks. Just a couple of follow-up questions, Abhishek. When you're referring to schedule compliance, it really is the schedule rule policies, correct? And
Correct.
all of the warning flags for those employees. That still can be configured in the background. Maybe we'll have a separate session or a future Dayforce Max session, how best to configure your schedule rule policies to meet your compliance needs. But this is in an additional component to help with the operational needs of some organizations, especially on those teams that need to have coverage for 7 days a week. There might even potentially be coverage for other times, not just daytime. There could be after and evening shifts. So creating the shift templates and then generating those filled shifts is a way for the managers to then be able to streamline their schedule creation based on operational demands. As you have shown, this is a bit of a manual way, so it does require admin or managers thinking about the quantities of job assignments and creating those templates. What other options are available for those companies looking to fully automate this process?
Yeah, so Dayforce does propose another feature called advanced scheduling. So through advanced scheduling, there's another feature called autofill. So basically what it does is it's a more dynamic way of scheduling employees, but it relies on historical data and demand. So you would basically populate or load in all your historical data for the different location. Dayforce would look at those historical data and the demand basically, and then try to fit or to obtain maximum coverage for these days automatically. So it's a more dynamic way of scheduling, and it doesn't rely on the shift definition with a fixed start and end time, but Dayforce can automatically try to find the best fit and assign an actual start and end time for those days and for those employees. So it's really an automated solution. It does require quite some bit of configuration, but it's, yeah, we've seen retail clients using that mostly. And yeah, that's an automated way of scheduling your employees.
Great. Yes. For the advanced WFM, that is a separate configuration. It usually isn't the standard implementation, but there's some comprehensive features that are available through advanced WFM, including the forecasting of demand, as you had referenced, Abhishek. Say you're a retail organization in the past Christmas time period, you've needed to increase your workforce. You have temporary hires filling in for a number of weeks. It pulls all that historical information and the patterns from past schedules to then auto fill the needs. So it's
Correct.
quite a bit of additional work, but of course you're now then be able to forecast your demand accurately when it comes to your workforce in the future. Great. So we will address any questions a bit later on as well. I do see one in the chat there. We will just quickly, while we're on this screen, take a look at some additional kind of shortcuts and tips and tricks for those that may not know of some of these additional extras. During the implementation, the managers might have one way of building their schedules. They're very comfortable. After a few months, they build up a habit, a way of doing things. The one thing we do want to show you is a bit of the difference between between what we call the grid and bar view, because this is sometimes missed. So Abhishek, if you can select on the options area, we can
Yep.
show the grid versus bar view. So currently the standard view is the grid view. If we select on the split view, you can see on the top of your page is now split out to what we call this bar view. If a manager says that, for example, everyone's currently based on the filled shifts scheduled from 9 to 5, but there actually needs to be additional coverage earlier on in Sunday, the manager can quickly drag the bar that they see for the employee, and the system down below automatically updates the start time based on the changes that you've made. So for Charlotte, you can see now her shift starts at 7:30 instead of the 9 o'clock that was filled based on the shift. And same thing with a number of other functions that are available up top. You can also add in activities as well if that's been configured, and you can move the meals and breaks that you can see there with that dining logo in the middle of the page. Again, it's just a quicker way for your managers to get a glance at their daily coverage. And instead of trying to decipher all of the numbers at the bottom of the grid, this is a really nice visual for those managers that would like to see this on one screen. Next up is Hemraj, who will be explaining a bit more about the importance of the zones setup and how that impacts your schedules. Abhishek, when you were filling in the shifts, there was a filter for zones. And Hemraj, let's take it away on your side to discuss about the zones' importance.
Yep.
Sure. Let me just share my screen.
Yes, you're good. We can see your screen.
Yeah. So hopefully it's the correct one. And yeah, this might be a little bit misleading where it says hello Beverly, but we're just using a demo slide just to make sure. Okay, so in this next demo, what we're looking at is the zones configuration. So normally we have the zones pre-configured when we do the initial data load. They are normally on a one-to-one basis compared to your department. I'm just going to go into the org structure and just take an example of a part of the organization here. So we have the assisted living district, and I'm going to use this particular site here. Okay, so as you can see here, within that site, you have many on-site departments within that site. You could have admin, and this is where the zone is attached on a one-to-one basis. So HC admin will have an HC admin zone. The same with the housekeeping, the medical, and so on. So what the simple functionality that I'm going to show next is the grouping of that can become very handy when you have managers that overlook two of these sub-departments and they have to post the schedule together. This would be done. Let me just show you a few. Just give me a second. Just going to sign in.
Are you looking for the admin
You
user, Hemraj? Yes, it's admin UK.
So on this screen, which is I'm going to be going to the schedules, and I'm going to also open the same site. Okay, so now I'm viewing that as a manager of that site where I can see all the employees within that specific location. So if we take admin, for example, employees there, maybe I can take a different. Oops. Just bear with me 1 second. Probably need to relog in. Okay. So as you can see here, we have these 3 employees under that on-site department. And let's say medical or nursing, for example, was another on-site department that you want grouped together. If you now go to schedule, you could filter by these individual zone that has been assigned to the department. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to change the zone to group them together. So I'm going to go to first the HC admin, and I've created a test zone. I'm going to assign that to the admin and also to the nursing department. And save. Note that this current setup, you will have to be a super user to be able to do that, because you won't be releasing these features to your manager, because this bit could affect other parts of how Dayforce work. So now I'm going to go to and reload that schedule screen. And now I'm going to filter by HC test, which is a new zone that I've assigned to both department, and apply. And that will give me the combined employees within these 2 on-site departments. Okay, so this is one of the simple functionality that you might have overlooked, especially for existing client with zones being set up in their organization structure. So this is certainly something that you could look to improve how that work best for your company. Also, I would also say that zones are heavily used in advanced scheduling, as Abby and Vicky stressed earlier, where you have amazing features that depends on the zone setup, but this is probably for a different call. So today was just the filtering options available within the zones.
Great, thank you,
Okay.
Hemraj. The one other area you wanted to demonstrate was just for the schedule approvals process.
Yeah.
Would you, we can run through it for a few minutes, and we'll hop over to the employee views for the next part of our masterclass today.
Okay. Yeah, so in this scenario for the approval, I'm going to be using 3 employees. You're going to have Jane, who is a general manager, Fiona, which is the line manager, and Adam, who is going to be the employee. Okay, so in this scenario, we're looking at Fiona submitting the schedule and Jane approving that schedule, which then becomes visible to Adam to view what has been scheduled for him. Okay, so I have 3 screens here that I've logged in already. So this is me as logging as Jane, Fiona, and lastly Adam. So the first step here would be to Fiona to submit the schedule. So I'm going to go to the schedule section. And yeah, I had this open already. So you would see the view of the schedule is slightly different. Pardon. In terms of this button here, you have the submit button, which is controlled by the role that has been associated with Fiona, compared to if you were to go to schedule as Jane, who is the general manager. You would see the option here of posts compared to Fiona. So this differentiate in the setup that is behind both of these roles. Fiona is currently an admin UK, Jane is currently an admin UK role, whereas Fiona is a manager UK role. So these parameters and configuration has been changed according to their roles so that we can follow that process of submitting the schedule and then being approved by Jane. Okay, so I'm just going to put a default schedule here. And we're just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to save this and click on submit. I'm just going to say test here, but this gives you the option if you want to put any message for Jane to review or to be notified when Jane's going to be approving this from yourself, you can put this comment here, and I'm going to click submit. Okay, and you get a small message here. Okay, so I've submitted that schedule already. Now I'm going to go in as Jane, and I'm going to go to my message center, and I will get a message here through my notification that a schedule has been submitted for approval. Obviously, in this current instance, we've only enabled the notification to come via the message center, but you could explore our notification methods that can be delivered to either your email or mobile. Okay, once I click on this, I will come to the screen here with the message, and I can, instead of going back to the schedule screen, I can just click on here, and that would bring me to that corresponding schedule that has been submitted. And here I will review this and click on post. So when I click on post, this could be filled with many submitted requests from different managers of those different departments. But as a general manager, I am going to view this. And this is the comment here that was submitted by Fiona. And I'm going to say approve. Okay. And then once I approve, I've reviewed and okay with all the schedule, I'm going to click on post. Okay, and that way that is posted. So now if I go as the employee view and I go into my work and then calendar, okay, and go to the corresponding week, I could see now that I have that schedule being posted for me, which is here. So this is basically the process or the life cycle of the manager submitting the timesheet, the schedule, the general manager approving it, and also the employee finally viewing those schedule.
Great. And Hamraj, just to mention here that this process is optional. It's not mandatory. It does depend on your organization's needs, especially for those GMs or department managers that would like visibility of the schedule before it's approved and would prefer to have ability to make adjustments or speak with the schedule creator just to ensure that they've accounted for maybe there's a big event happening or some sort of additional shifts that are needed. So this is a really great way, instead of just having managers post directly and constantly having back and forth changes and requests from either your department manager to make amendments, you can enable the relevant configuration for your managers to submit to a department manager or a GM for review.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. I think that's one point I've missed during the demo, which is crucial. With this method, the employee will only see the schedules in their calendar only when it is posted, not when it is submitted. Yeah, exactly as you mentioned, this will help in addressing that issue.
Great. And since you're here on the employee screen, we'll move on to a bit more discussions now. We've heavily focused the first part of our masterclass on what managers and system admin can reconfigure to support a more seamless scheduling process. But for those organizations that are allowing employees access to the schedule calendar, and as well, not just on the web browser, there's a number of screens that employees can certainly access on the mobile app as well. So think of those workforces that their employees aren't really there in front of a desktop often or a tablet, and those mobile focused workforces. A number of the functionalities that we will be pointing you to now are available in the mobile app. You just, of course, need to enable it under the role access. So here, Hamraj, if you don't mind, I'll direct you in terms of the next parts. We just wanted to bring the perspective of you're an employee, you need to figure out your future shifts, and I need to understand when I need to show up for work, where I need to show up, and there's some additional additional functionality here that we can cover when it comes to additional details. So you already navigate into the work calendar area, but as Hemraj is highlighting, you can see the shift details here. And this provides a quick overview of the start and end times, even meal starts and end, any manager comments that have been included in the schedule. These are all visible as standard for the employee to then ensure that they show up for their shifts on time. If there's any amendments to the schedules, this is updated live. So as soon as the managers approve and there's any amendments, there isn't that back and forth and manual communication between the employees and manager to figure out what's been changed. It's all visible at their fingertips from the employee's perspective. Then we also have here another area where you can configure down below. We'll run through very quickly what the additional drop downs are. Again, maybe in a future, if there's any appetite for a future Dayforce Max session, we can cover some of the features when you enable the availability functionality. So this is for employees to submit their availability at a future looking date. And then the managers can then take a note of the availability of the employee when it comes to the scheduling. So that's what that availability dropdown is for. The employees can also have access to their attendance scorecard, so they can see any lates, any unexcused absences. We won't go into in detail, but again, that's also a separate configuration for your attendance management area of WFM, where you can attribute employees showing up late to their attendance scorecard. The one thing we do want to cover in more detail today would be the shift trade option. So when employees would like to trade or swap their shifts, there are a number of options that are available. For example, offering the shift to everyone, which means that to myself as Adam, I can offer my Sunday, the 13th shift, because maybe I have something going on personally and not able to do it. I can offer the shift to everyone, and all my other colleagues that are assigned to the same job assignment and part of this location will then get a prompt to say Adam has a shift available open on the 13th, and the employees themselves can take ownership of swapping and offering shifts. If you select the third one down, Hemraj, I do want to share with the audience members what happens when you configure a shift trading policy. So this is attached to the employee record as well, but it follows some of the concepts that we've covered that Abhishek has covered in previously. So let's click on swap shift, and the screen will show a number of different fields for Adam as the employee to search in the future for a shift to swap with a fellow colleague. In this scenario, let's pick Michael, for example. Michael Deacon down below, and click the search button. So essentially what I'm enabling is for the employee to take ownership of swapping shifts. Instead of having to approach the manager, you can allow the employees to then communicate amongst themselves in terms of shift swapping and coverage for each other. So you can see that for Michael, the only shift based on the parameters would be Monday, the June the 30th shift. If Adam tries to post this shift, what will happen is that the system will also look at the schedule rule policies and the compliance rules that we've built in the backend. And if it's not allowed in terms of there's any violations, for example, if Michael is already working that day, or the shift swap would go over and beyond the maximum allowed hours for Michael, the system will automatically run through all of the schedule rule policies and provide an error that will prevent Adam from requesting the shift swap. Hemraj, let's click on post and let's see what happens. I'm not sure if there's a error for this one. This one was accepted. So you can see from the employee's view now, there is a orange arrow, which indicates a shift has been posted. And as an employee, I can click on the, sorry, not that one, the shift swap, shift trade, and you can either revoke the shift trade or I can view the shift trade history. And it will state that it's currently pending with Michael. So the process usually happens where Adam can submit the shift swap, Michael does need to accept it, and the manager has the final say. So it's a two-layer approval process. Once Michael accepts, then the manager, Fiona, will receive a notification to say there's been a shift swap that's been accepted by both parties. Do you approve this? So again, this is a way way to help facilitate the common scenario where employees are moving shifts around, they're covering for one another for different scheduled shifts. This is the way to help you facilitate that. In order for this to be set up, the admins do need to access the shift setup and the shift trading policy to create these rules and parameters where you are then restricting maybe the maximum number of shift trades that are allowed per week. You can also restrict the job assignments that are allowed to shift swap. And there are a number of different rules that you can configure on the back end and to, as system administrators, to create those boundaries. So that way you're just not letting your employees swap any shifts that they prefer. There are some guidelines and rules that can be built into this type of configuration. So that's
Thank you, Vicky.
thanks, Hamraj. And there's one other thing I did want to point out under the calendar view here. Below the shift trade is the shift bidding. After Abhishek has demonstrated all the unfilled shifts that were part of the schedule, if we were to post all of those unfilled shifts, the employees themselves, all of the colleagues, can then raise their hand through the system and say, I would like to work on the 13th. I know there's 4 unfilled shifts and I'm not doing anything on Sunday, so I'd like to volunteer and bid for the opportunity to work for that
I
shift.
very doubted they will on a Sunday, Vicky.
Okay, maybe not on a Sunday, but on a Monday, perhaps. If there are unfilled shifts and there's qualified employees that have a secondary job assignment for customer service associate, this is another way to then, in addition to the filled shifts that Abhishek demonstrated, this is where we're tying everything together now. Once the backbone is set up, the employees themselves have the information to be able to then bid for a shift that's currently unfilled. So that's it for our run through of the quick areas of the work calendar. Next up, let's move on to the important component of schedule notifications very briefly. So this is again something that you can, as administrators, configure on the back end. There are some system notifications, so we just briefly went through a couple of them. For example, the schedule's been posted. Jane was able to see when I had an action item, but a number of these system notifications are configured, as Hemraj is showing, under the system admin system notifications area. So there are quite a few subscriptions and channels that you can configure when it comes to the workforce management. At the very bottom there, workforce managing, scheduling, and availability. This is now pushing out some of these standard notifications. For example, for an employee schedule change, that's usually what happens when the manager makes a change to the schedule. The employees are then notified on their mobile or on the web application that we have a schedule change. So they should check the schedule and ensure that they show up to the correct shift. There's a number of other schedule notifications as well. For example, the schedule posts, that's a critical one. Once Jane has approved, that's the notification that you would configure along with a background job to deliver that message to your employees through the message center. Any other input here, Hemraj, on your end, or Abhishek, for
No, I was just going
notifications?
to give just the one example where I've enabled this for the schedule when posted, you get a notification. So yeah,
Great.
I think we can now move on to probably the last part of the importance of having a schedule or shift rotation or a work contract, although you are a salaried employee. So normally what we've seen is salaried employees, they don't normally track time, they are auto-paid. So why the need of having a shift rotation assigned to a salary? So in the following example that I'm going to show is basically 2 employees. Let's say they are salaried. One does a Monday to Friday, and the other one does a Monday to Thursday. So what we interested is the sickness or the SSP aspect of it. As you may know, the current weekly allowance for SSP is 118.75. But how we use Dayforce shift rotation in this following example to determine what is the amount that is given per day when you're eligible for SSP. So if you think about it, an employee working 5 days a week, that has a standard Monday to Friday. So if they were to be sick for a week, you would expect the value of the SSP to be 118.75 divided by 5 and be equivalent for that 1 day. Compared to the employee that is a 4-day week employee, their value would be 118 divided by 4. And when they qualify, this is the daily value that they will receive. Okay, so I'm going to go as an admin and view the employee Adam. So what I'm just showing here is the employee profile where we need some default values assigned to the employee for this to work. So you would see here for Adam have a UK 4 days, should be normally 5 days, might be a typo. 5 days, Monday to Friday. And then I will have another employee, which go to location 30. Let me just check. So I had this pre-populated already. Let me just check the time that I have for Adam. Okay, so here we can see the two employees that I'm going to use for this demo. So we have Adam, where they have a normal Monday to Friday shift. And then we have Beth that has a typical Monday to Thursday. So we're expecting two values of SSP when they qualify. So Adam would be on the first day that they qualify for SSP. And we also have Beth that would qualify for SSP on the first day. But before I go to that, I'm just going to quickly just show you the driver behind this, which is from the pay policy and the SSP rule. So we're going to be looking at the CS hourly UK pay policy and look at the SSP rule here. Okay, so this is the behind the scene where the rule is being used to calculate the SSP. And you would see here we have 4 main qualifiers. So we have the old days, where the amount of the SSP value is going to be divided by 7 if we use that. We have the schedule, and the schedule is mostly used for ad hoc employees that don't have a standard work contract or shift rotation. So you could be working 3 days a week, this week 1, 2 days a week 2, and this is as per needed basis. So you would then use the schedule so to be able to determine the SSP. And then we have the shift rotation, which we are currently using at the moment. And lastly, the work contract. Okay, so for this demo, we're using the shift rotation, and just conscious of time, we have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go next to the timesheet, and we have already assigned a 1 week off. So if we look at the pay element on the Thursday for someone that does 5 day a week. We can see here the value of the SSP is the 118 divided by 5. But if we look at the value for this employee, you could see that the value for SSP is 118.75 divided by 4. So this, through this setup, although let's assume that these two employees were salaried, we technically didn't need to track their time or have a schedule populated for them. But just to get the correct SSP calculation, we just need to put them under a shift rotation.
Great, thanks,
Uh,
Hemraj.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything around that. But this topic is very wide, so please reach out to us if you have specific. We wouldn't be able to cover everything in 1 hour, but this is just an overview.
Yes, it's a prime example of how you may think some employees wouldn't need to have something like schedules configured. So those salaried employees, maybe they're just on auto pay. You also don't need timesheets because they're not swiping in and out and they're not tracking their time. But in the back end, as system administrators, we recognize the importance of adding that shift rotation to that salaried employee in order for those calculations to properly reflect in payroll. So that's the type of guidance that we've encountered in previous scenarios. Hemraj and Abhishek are your specialists when it comes to average holiday pay, statutory sick pay. And as you did say, Hemraj, there's a significant amount of information when it comes to the best practice of configuration, depending on your workforce, the fluctuating employees, as you mentioned, the work contracts, shift rotations. Again, maybe if there's an appetite in the future, we can certainly host a Dayforce Max session a little bit more on the SSP itself. Just to be cognizant of time, I appreciate everyone joining us today. There's a mixture between the managers, features and schedules, the employees of options that can help support, make your employees' lives better when it comes to scheduling. We did have a question submitted, a Q&A in regards to the autofill, so I did want to acknowledge that. We will certainly come back to you, this audience member, and contact you afterwards just to discuss this a little bit more so we can run through the response. And for those that are joining us for the first time, we do have pre-recorded Dayforce Max sessions on the Silver Cloud YouTube channel. One of them was on payroll and Hemraj on statutory sick pay, from what I recall. So feel free to check those out and look out for our upcoming Dayforce Max session in about 2 or 3 months' time from now. But we very much appreciate everyone joining us today, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. All.
Bye.
Bye-bye.